There's a particular kind of trait called sex-linked traits that is going to be found on either the X or the Y chromosome. So here we have a picture of actual human chromosomes, and they've been organized so that each chromosome is with its match, or its homologous pair. It's with the other chromosome that's the same length and size and shape as it. And so if you count them all, you would notice that there are 46 of them, and they're all in pairs, except for these last two, the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. And these two chromosomes are special. They're the ones that tell you whether you're a boy or a girl. If you're a boy, you have an X and a Y chromosome. If you're a girl, then you have two X chromosomes. And we call these the sex chromosomes because they tell you your sex, whether you're a boy or a girl. And there are some traits that are found on these chromosomes that behave differently than other traits, so they're called sex-linked traits. This picture of chromosomes with them all paired with their homologous pair and then put in order from longest to shortest is called a karyotype, and this is the way that doctors organize chromosomes so that they can see if there's any chance for a genetic disease or some kind of disorder because of maybe a damaged chromosome or a missing chromosome. And so they might make a karyotype to be able to diagnose something like that. Humans have 46 chromosomes. Different kinds of animals have different numbers of chromosomes, and humans happen to have 46. And when you arrange them into their homologous pairs, you get 23 pairs. The 23rd pair of chromosomes that we looked at in the picture are called the sex chromosomes because they tell you if you're male or female. And females have two X chromosomes, and males have an X and a Y. So in the picture up there, we were looking at male chromosomes. Sex-linked traits have genes that are located on the X chromosome. If you notice in the picture, the X chromosome is much longer than the Y chromosome. That's because it contains some genes that are not found on the Y chromosome. And so these particular traits are going to be found on the X chromosome. The genes of sex-linked traits are not going to be found on the Y chromosome, just on the X. And since these genes that are called sex-linked are only on the X chromosome, that means that females who have two X chromosomes will have two alleles for each of these traits, while males who only have one X chromosome will only have one allele for each of these traits. An example of a sex-linked trait that can be found on the X chromosome is hemophilia. And hemophilia is a condition where a person's blood doesn't clot correctly, and so if they get cut, they have a chance of bleeding to death because their blood won't clot. And so what tells you whether you have hemophilia or not are the genes on your X chromosome. So when we represent these with letters, because it's a sex-linked trait, we're going to use an X to represent that trait because it's found on the X chromosome. But we're going to add to that X a letter that will represent this particular gene. And since this is hemophilia, it starts with an H, we'll choose an H to represent it. And because hemophilia is the recessive trait, the way we would write a gene for hemophilia is X with a superscript little h, because it's a recessive trait. And then the opposite of that gene would be the dominant trait for normal blood clotting, which would be represented by an X and a capital H, because the normal blood clotting gene is the dominant gene. So keep in mind that in order for a female to have hemophilia, she must have the recessive hemophilia gene, or the X lowercase h, on both of her X chromosomes. She needs two of those to be able to actually have hemophilia. Because remember that if there's any dominant gene present, then it's going to take over. So if she has one X lowercase h and one X capital H, then it would be the capital H that gets expressed, because that's the dominant gene. So with this in mind, because males have only one X chromosome, if they have a single hemophilia allele, or one X little h, that means that they will have the disease, because on their Y chromosome there's no dominant allele to cover it up, because the Y chromosome does not carry the gene for this trait. So, for this reason, hemophilia and other sex-linked traits like it that are found on the X chromosome are more common in men. because it is more likely that they would inherit one of these genes on their X chromosome than it is that they would inherit two. So women are more likely not to have the disease, while men are more likely to have the disease.